when I'm on the beach, it's not so much what I'm seeing, it's more a state of mind and how I'm feeling. And then that is then hopefully what I'm conveying through my photography.
Welcome to the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast. I'm Angela Nicholson and I'm the founder of She Clicks, which is a community for female photographers. In these podcasts, I talk with women in the photographic industry to hear about their experiences, what drives them, and how they got to where they are now. This episode is with Shona Perkins, the woman behind My Beautiful Scotland. Shona specialises in seascape photography and intentional camera movement. She also runs workshops and retreats, as well as offering one-to-one tuition. Hi Shona, thank you so much for joining me today on the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast.
Hi Angela, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really, really pleased to be here. Been a big follower of She Clicks and what you've created for some time now.
Oh, thank you. And you're very welcome. Thank you. So let's start right at the beginning. How did you first get drawn into photography?
Oh, that's a very big question, and one obviously I always get asked. And it's quite hard to answer in an hour-long podcast. But I'll start at the very beginning. Yeah, I'll start at the very beginning. I guess I grew up in a time when there were no mobile phones, no social media, and good old 90s. And I think a lot of people all had a point and shoot, wind and click film camera at that point, and everybody printed their photographs, and everybody had photo albums and shoeboxes full of photos, and that was very much part of what I did. I documented everything, every family holiday, every family trip, school days. I literally documented everything throughout my childhood and, dare I say, early adulthood. And I've now got shoeboxes full of photographs and albums, which I think is a really special thing. And I think it's actually a shame nowadays where we've got the mobile phones and everybody just uploads albums to Facebook and doesn't get to really, really see photographs in print. But it wasn't until probably 2015, 2016 that I started actually taking photography quite seriously, as opposed to just having a point and shoot in my bag. I haven't been a professional photographer all my life, and actually was doing something very far removed from what I'm doing now. I was in fashion retail and I was a regional manager for an iconic British brand. I know a lot of women will know it. It was Oasis I worked for. And Oasis were a brand under Aurora, which had Cara Millen Coast Warehouse. Sadly, they didn't survive COVID and are no longer on the high street. I worked with them for 20 years. I worked with a big team. And sadly, my role as a regional manager got shrunk from 9 regional managers to 4 regional managers, which was inevitable given the economic sort of state of retail at the time. I chose to take redundancy at that point, and that was sort of early 2017. At first, it was a mixture of emotions, absolute, roller coaster of emotions. There was an element of excitement, a bit of time off, can kind of ground myself and decide what I'm going to do. Then what really hit me the hardest was I actually grieved. I actually mourned my team and my job and the business and my career for a long time. I actually think it's only probably the last 18 months that I've stopped doing that. And when I first came out of the job, it was the first time that I had stopped working since I was 16 years old. And I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to do nothing. I probably at that point realised I'd never had it diagnosed, but maybe I had hit a wall and I had hit burnout at that point, entered some quite dark places, and I turned my attentions to photography. And I sort of made some decisions quite quickly, and the first one being, no, I'm going to take some time out. I need time out. I need to rest, and I need to figure out what I want to do. And I knew I didn't want to go back to that world. As much as I missed it, I didn't want to go back to it. So at that point, I bought my first DSLR and enrolled with the British Academy of Photography. And I thought, right, okay, I'm going to learn and understand what I can do with a digital camera. And so started my adventures around Scotland. And I was lucky enough, I was in a position that I was able to then sort of travel around Scotland do some studying, really understand photography, really start to get a feel for what can I do. And at that point in time, I was, I was drawn to all the, the iconic locations, the honeypots, and, and they're all very, very beautiful places to go and visit. But quite quickly, I started kind of wanting a little bit more in my photography. And so came my sort of desire and my passion for long exposure photography, and was following a lot of long exposure and sort of more minimalism on social media. And I was really drawn to this, and I was really kind of keen to experiment with that. And that inevitably sort of then led into me starting to experiment with moving the camera. And that all happened quite quickly. So by sort of 2018, I was kind of actively doing sort of ICM, intentional camera movement, long exposure photography, and really sort of seeking out more sort of minimal scenes and wanting to spend more and more time by the sea. So that's not the short answer, is it?
No, that's fine. We want to hear the long answers. That's what we want to hear about. So the course that you did that teach you anything about long exposure or intentional camera movement, or was it more the kind of traditional photography, what aperture does and what shutter speed's for?
In hindsight, I suppose I came from a corporate background and a corporate career, and I came out and I went straight into the more academic kind of courses and was searching for. And in hindsight, if I was to do the same thing now, I would be going and looking for those hands-on workshops with photographers out in the field. And that is the way I learn, out in the field, experimenting, doing it, as opposed to the more theoretical side of things. So there was quite a lot of sort of theory-based studying and research involved in the course that I took. But that said, I did really learn my way around a camera. And I think that's important in what I'm doing now.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of ways of doing that sort of academic side of photography now, which is great. You can do it in person, you can do it online, you can do it, you can type a few questions into YouTube and you get some great answers.
Yeah.
But also there's a really broad spectrum of hands-on workshops now with all sorts of photographers, which is brilliant. It's a much less dry, more enjoyable way of learning photography, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So what is it about intentional camera movement and seascapes that really pull you in, and why do you combine those two?
Yeah, great question. And the first answer is just going back to sort of when I stopped working. I'm a hard worker. I'm a very driven person. I'm very ambitious. And all my life, really, even as a child, I had the inability to stop. I'm always doing. And I think that's a very female trait, isn't it? We're multitaskers and we've always got a job list and we've always got things to do. But
yes.
And I've lived with that, but it can be a problem. I literally can't switch my brain off, and it becomes at times quite exhausting. My idea of resting or relaxing and switching off at home will be pushing the Hoover around because it takes my mind off things. I'm doing something else. The only place that quietens my mind is the beach. And I've always loved the sea, and I've always lived close to the sea. Holidayed in Cornwall as a child, as I lived in the south of England back then. But it really is the only place that I am calm and my mind is quiet. And that is why, because a lot of people ask me, why do you only do ICM with seascapes? And, are you interested in doing other subjects such as urban? And I'm like, well, no, to be honest, when I go out with my camera, I want to go to the beach. I want to be by the sea. And that is my place, that I have those moments of calm. And I guess, I hope that then comes across in my photography, as it's really what I'm trying to convey. And when I'm on the beach, it's not so much what I'm seeing, it's more a state of mind and how I'm feeling. And then that is then hopefully what I'm conveying through my photography. And ICM's just, and again, it's a very slow process. My approach to ICM has changed quite considerably over the last sort of two and a bit years from when I started out. From starting out in that sort of frantic, excited, kind of experimental, waving the camera around everywhere stage, I'm now much more considered in my approach and a lot slower, with a lot less, and take a lot less photographs. And It's more about that process of being behind the lens for that sort of, 2 seconds, which when you're behind the lens is quite a long time. So I enjoy it. I enjoy it immensely. I enjoy the results. And why ICM, if I could sum that up in one sentence, it would be, if I could paint, then it's how I would paint the scene I see. That is what I'm trying to create with ICM. People laugh at me when I say I don't always consider my images blurry, and people laugh at me. But really, sometimes I just think I'm just softening those edges a little bit, just how I would if I painted it. And sometimes I like to keep a bit of a literal feel to my images and then just soften those edges.
So one of the issues or pleasures as well that I have with long exposure photography and therefore ICM is that there's always something beyond your control, particularly thinking, like with waves moving, that they're always different.
Yes.
And therefore your pictures are always different. And therefore it's always that compulsion to, I'll just do one more. I'll just do one more. And then suddenly, it's dark and it's time to go home. How do you get around that? How do you know when to stop? Or maybe you don't. Maybe you're like me.
Oh, no, I really relate to that. Waves. Photographing waves is obsessive. I remember that there's a couple of days that really stick out in my memory, and I'll use one of them as an example. I was actually on holiday in the Isle of Harris, and amazing conditions, fantastic, probably 10-foot waves, epic, beautiful dark skies, backlit. It was perfect, absolutely perfect. Trouble being, I was on holiday with my husband and my dog. So it's that fine balance, isn't it, in terms of, right, okay, I'm just going to take a few photographs, to my husband that I'm just going to go and sit in the car and I'll wait in the car. And that's when you kind of think, oh, how long have I been? It's hard. Yeah. It is hard. With waves, for me, I do get quite obsessed in terms of what I want to capture. And it's not just about waiting for that perfect moment to capture the perfect wave. It's really thinking about the whole scene, composing the whole frame and capturing that wave when the water's coming towards you perfectly. And you just keep going and going. So I could spend hours, literally hours.
Okay, so you don't, it just sort of keep going until the point you've had enough, your husband's had enough, or the dog saying, it's dinner time.
Or it's too dark, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, same as me then. And we have quite extreme tides in this country, or that's my perception anyway, certainly in most of the places I seem to go. And of course, that introduces another element because the beach is changing, but also as the tide comes in or out, the waves change form and position as well. So you're constantly adapting, I guess.
Yeah. And that's the beauty about it as well, I think. And I think with that, I think the more you know a beach and the more time you spend at that beach at different points in the tide, the more you get to know that beach and the more you can connect with that beach. But you also, it's just really important to me to have that connection, but also that understanding of, what I'm wanting to achieve and when I need to visit.
Well, actually, speaking of tides, though, do you prefer to photograph in a receding tide or a pushing tide?
It depends what I'm photographing. So generally speaking, for big, vast, reflective seascapes, I like the tide to be going out. Not fully out, probably midway. Got that nice sort of then clean, all the footprints have been washed away, and you will have some wet sand and some tidal pools starting to sort of reveal themselves, creating some really interesting patterns. So that's ideal. If I'm photographing waves, I prefer the tide to be coming in. I prefer it to be quite high. So it really depends on, I can, if I'm going out shooting on my own, obviously I am really very aware of what's happening with the waves and the weather and the tides, and will make a decision on where I'm going and know kind of, what sort of images I'm probably going to achieve before I actually get to the beaches I'm going to.
Now, this has become something of a burning issue in She Clicks. Do you prefer to photograph at sunrise or sunset?
It depends on the time of year. So I need 8 hours sleep a night.
Right.
I do need 8 hours sleep a night. So in the summer in Scotland, I just can't do it. I just can't get up at 3 a.m. In fact, right now, we're just getting back to a nice time. I think the sunrise is about 5:20 now. And actually, I've got a local beach, so I'm actually probably going to enjoy getting out for sunrise again in the next couple of weeks. I would say sunrise is very, very beautiful. So arriving at the beach in the dark, watching the sunrise is a very, very special experience. But equally so, I've had some really amazing experiences at sunset as well. I personally love a blue hour, whether it's before sunrise or after sunset, when that light and that mood just sort of softens into those sort of blues and purples, and that light becomes really magical at that time.
Okay, so I think there's a few more people coming out on the side of sunrise is too early at some times of the year, which is certainly the camp I'm in.
It's hard.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Do you have a kind of set pattern to your photography? You know, do you go out every day or certain days of the week?
I wish I could go out every day. So no is the answer to that. Since I've started teaching and doing workshops, one-to-ones, I find myself, and I guess this is what some people don't realise, quite how much admin is involved in running workshops and retreats, and I'm just at the stage sort of getting next year's program ready and organising, selling a retreat, even the pre-work that's involved in, sourcing locations, accommodation, collaborations, that sort of thing. It's quite intensive. Maintaining sort of and managing relationships with clients. I do quite a lot of Zooms for overseas clients. All of that takes quite a lot of time sitting at the desk. Next week, I've got 2 full-day workshops, which I'm looking forward to, and I'll be getting out with clients. But when I'm with clients, I'm not really having that opportunity for myself to do my own photography. So honestly, this past summer, I've barely gotten out at all. But I have got plans in the next few weeks that I'm going to start setting that alarm early and getting back out for sunrise locally. And I'm off to Harris on holiday on my own.
Oh, lovely. But do you find yourself yearning for that time when you are going to get onto the beach, when you can take your own photographs?
Yes, I do. And it's just that ability to be on your own, isn't it? So you can actually, because you get into, well, I certainly do when I'm doing ICM on the beach, that you get into a fully meditative state, a fully immersive state, don't you? And you can only get into that flow and that flow state when you're on your own. And yeah, it's a little too rare. At the beginning of every year, at New Year's Day, I'm always like, this is the year I'm going to be really disciplined. I'm going to give more time for myself, and I'm going to get out with my camera more. And all of a sudden, it's August. And I don't really know where this year has gone, because it's August already.
Please excuse this interruption. Thank you to Seawe, Europe's leading photo printing company, for supporting this podcast. Seawe offers an extensive range of high-quality photo products, including the award-winning Seawe Photobook. Creating a Seawe Photobook of your amazing holiday captures the essence of your adventures in a tangible form. It's a timeless reminder of the unforgettable moments that would otherwise just be sitting on your hard drive or phone. A Seawe Photobook allows you to revisit and cherish those moments for years to come. Visit seawe.co.uk for more inspiration. Okay, let's get back to the show. You mentioned workshops. I was going to ask you about those. When did you start leading those, and what was the trigger or that made you feel comfortable to start offering them?
Yeah, it's a nerve-wracking thing. And when I was at school, I always wanted to be a teacher. And I was very passionate about becoming a teacher. And sadly, it didn't transpire. But in my career, there was an awful lot of mentoring. There was an awful lot of coaching and development that was part of the role. So it did feel inevitable that would be probably later on in my life where I would go to, just in what form I didn't know at the time. I guess how it all happened, I did a talk with Viewfinder's podcast, but it was a live talk on Zoom. And I believe that was 2021. I don't think Viewfinder's podcast is actually on anymore, but I did this talk, and an American lady had signed up to the talk and contacted me after the talk and said, I'm coming to Scotland in April. Would you do a one-to-one with me? And I was like, can I do that? Can I do that? Oh, wow. And I did. And I'm still very much in contact with Linda from Los Angeles right now, and I thank her immensely for giving me that confidence to make that leap. So I started very slowly, and I think really everything that's happened from 2021 to now has gone really slowly. I wanted to do it purposely in an organic way, not to push things, to move at a pace that I was comfortable with in terms of my confidence. And it started off with one-to-ones, which then progressed to sort of small group workshops and one-day workshops. And I had met Stephanie Johnson, who is the founder of the ICM photography magazine, and I met her in 2020, and we'd been talking on and off, and I'd been in the magazine, and we then decided to co-lead a couple of retreats. So these were 5-day retreats in the Outer Hebrides, and they went very well. So that was my first sort of venture into organising from scratch and going out there and leading experiential retreat. And it all just sort of grew arms and legs quite quickly after that. And all of a sudden, I was realising, no, this really is the direction I want to go in. And when you're on a residential retreat and you're part of, a small group of people in a quite an intensive environment, it's just amazing how deep the connection becomes so quickly. And I can be quite an overly emotional person, and yeah, I've cried at the end of every single one I've done so far, and I've made great friendships from some of the people that, I've met through photography. And it's the most rewarding thing to see people come together in a supportive environment and actually go on a journey. And I think it's really, really special. So yes, I'm planning as many as I can, but trying to balance, obviously, the workload, the family, the dog, and,
everything.
It can be quite hard.
Oh, yes. Yeah. When you're starting a new venture and it involves other people, quite naturally, they have some questions. And if it's your first workshop and someone's asking you about what will the workshop be, how will it be run and stuff, and you might be thinking, I'll get back to you on that, because, they're asking questions. Maybe they've been on other workshops, and so they've got experience of what that is like, and they want to know whether yours is similar or different. And
yeah. I think, to be honest, I'm absolutely meticulous for detail, and I'm very, very organised. I'm a planner, as was Stephanie, because it was her first retreat as well. We went into absolute immense depths of planning beforehand, a lot of research. For me, when you're running a workshop or a retreat and you're creating this experience for people, then the skills you need to be able to facilitate, you need to be able to organise, you need to be able to engage, motivate. It's more than just photography. It's way more than just photography. And actually the skills that I have from my previous career really, really supported this. And I felt really quite comfortable in terms of actually managing a group of people, bringing them together, making sure everybody felt inclusive and motivated, even when times were a little bit more challenging or conditions were challenging.
Have your workshops evolved much since you started? You've done the first one, you've done a few now. Have they changed much? Have you added new things or, adapted them to accommodate what people want?
Yes. And I think I've grown just more comfortable in general as well. I mean, in terms of my one-day workshops that I run throughout the summer, people are travelling, up from the south of England to come and spend a day with me. And I'm frantically weather watching, hoping and praying that, they're going to have good conditions for them to really get the best out of it. And I used to get quite stressed about that. Whereas I've had a few now where the rain has been on, and it's just learning how to manage that. And actually realising, well, we're photographers, we're outdoor photographers. Rain actually can bring some really great opportunities and some really great moments of light. And it's building in contingencies. And I've gone off to, restaurants and done image reviews and then found, do you know what? They really benefited from that. They really enjoyed that. I'm going to build that in. I went from having sandwiches on deck chairs to actually we're going to go and have dinner at a pub. So, it's evolving, and they will continuously evolve, definitely. And it's just all part of the experience. I think as well, it's gaining as much knowledge of the participants beforehand as well, so you can really start tailoring what it is that you're going to be able to offer them.
Do you find that most people that come on your courses are keen to get out whatever the weather, or do you have to cajole them a little bit?
I have had a couple of workshops where the weather has been really, really challenging, as in torrential rain, but there were moments of absolute beautiful light and mood and atmosphere. And you could just see how excited they were by that. Everybody's up for it. Everybody's, I have spare everything in my car. I'm the girl guide. I have the spare waterproof trousers. I have the spare socks. I have the spare gloves, the spare hats. Nobody goes without anything. So it is all about just being prepared for absolute every single eventuality, and bringing a bit of fun. You have to make sure everybody's comfortable. So for me, you start out in a coffee shop and get to know one another and relax everybody. And they're usually great days.
That sounds like a really nice way to spend time.
Yeah.
I see you've got an exhibition coming up in November. What can you tell us about that?
Yes. Now, this makes me nervous. Oh, not going to lie. So I'm really excited, really, really excited. And this will be my first time exhibiting. So I'm completely new to this. And I've dabbled with selling prints in the past. But as soon as I got quite heavily involved in the teaching aspect, I something had to give. So I stopped selling any prints whatsoever. And I knew at some point I would go down the exhibition route. I just didn't know it would come so quickly. So I formed a relationship with the very wonderful Dickson Reid. She's a Scottish contemporary artist, paints oils on canvas largely, but also uses other mediums. I first contacted her 2 years ago. Having followed her work, she's a local photographer to me, so we photograph the same beaches. And I just really connect to her work and I really resonate with her work. And I had this vision and this idea that I wanted to, because I think about what I do in terms of, okay, I can't paint, so I'm going to, use ICM to create a painterly scene. And I thought, right, okay, I'm going to see whether Fee will come on board with me, work with me, and we'll run a retreat called Capture to Canvas. This was my vision. And I will teach people ICM. We will then use that ICM as the inspiration to put onto canvas, as opposed to just painting a literal photograph. It will help create that beautiful painterly effect that Fee has. She loved the idea, but she exhibits. She doesn't teach. So she at first was a little, oh, can I do that? We spent quite a bit of time putting together the retreat details. We've now done 2. Very successful, amazing retreats. We've got one more coming next October, and we'll probably do one a year. And, well, Capture to Canvas has just grown arms and legs and moved on quite quickly. And we came up with the idea that we'd like to do a joint exhibition. Now, we spoke about it after March this year, we spoke about it. And I probably thought this will happen sort of later next year. But then Fee sort of went to work and found us a gallery. And the dates are the 29th of November to the 6th of December. We're exhibiting at a lovely photography gallery, actually, called Gallery Close in Edinburgh. And it's right in the heart of the gallery district in Newtown in Edinburgh. And we'll be taking sole occupancy of the gallery for the week. And I'm immensely excited. I also just feel really, really honoured for Fee to mentor me in a way to get me ready to be able to, because there's a lot of work involved in putting on an exhibition. And I feel genuinely honoured that I'm going to be, handheld, shall we say, by, a true expert.
I think it's really interesting that you started this conversation. You were talking about how everybody used to produce prints, when you had your compact camera and you were a kid and you photographed, documented everything, and you always had all these prints. And now you're a professional photographer, you lead workshops, and now you're also producing prints for your first exhibition. That seems like a really nice circle.
Yeah. And I knew that I've had conversations with other photographers that you reach a place where it's kind of, in photography, if you want to make a living doing photography, which is hard, and being self-employed is very, very hard, another conversation, but you kind of get to a stage, don't you? And it's like you can go the exhibiting route, or you can kind of go the teaching route, because both take up so much time and investment. And obviously the teaching route is something that is my heart. I love to teach, and I'm so rewarded by the people I meet, and that's my inspiration. But I also knew that I definitely wanted to. Every photographer loves to see their work in print. And I've just started working on the collection that I'm going to exhibit. I'm going to be exhibiting 25 pieces. I'm just starting to sort of work through what that looks like. And I've got a first sort of draft of images, and I actually said to my husband last night, I was like, I'm like seeing these in print on the wall. If it all works out and it all goes well, it all goes to plan, will potentially be one of the proudest moments of my life. And it's a really immense thing,
And when you say you're just going through sorting out your images, there's going to be 25. Are they all already shot? You know, have we been seeing them on your Instagram account, for example, and you're making a selection from those, or are you shooting new stuff?
They're already all shot. I am going to the Isle of Harris before the show, but for me, the timelines won't be long enough, and I don't want to put that pressure. And I find myself, I'm able to objectively look at my images much, much better and much more clearer when a bit of time has passed. So yes, I started off with 40 images, and I'm now sort of breaking it down to 25, and I'm quite happy with the collection. They are all going to be ICM images because that is the connection. I've even taught Fee how to do ICM photography, and she's even said it's evolved and elevated her painting, and she's even doing more wave paintings now as well, with a more sort of, free-flowing, less literal sense, should we say. So that's kind of the connection.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think now's a really good time to go to 6 from She Clicks. I've got 10 questions from She Clickers, and I'd like you to answer 6 of them, please, by picking numbers from 1 to 10. So could you give me your first number, please?
I'm going to go for number 6, please.
Number 6. Oh, this is a good one. Do you have any tips for keeping physically comfortable on wide open beaches when the weather isn't its best? That's from Paula.
Hi, Paula. That's a great question, especially as I'm spending a lot of time on Scottish Outer Hebrides beaches in the winter. That's a really good question. So I suffer really, really badly from Raynaud's syndrome. And for those of you who don't know what that is, I have difficulties with blood flow. They're very thin veins, really, and my fingers go numb, toes go numb, my lips go numb. And it's not necessarily just temperature that makes that happen, but usually it is. So I am very, very prepared. So for me, a good pair of waterproof deck-style gloves is absolutely critical in keeping the rest of my body warm. And I can't take them off, so I have to make sure that they're deck-style enough to be able to use the camera with them. I have hand warmers that I use religiously, and I just keep them in my pockets. I wear tights under my leggings, waterproof trousers, whether it's raining or not, because they keep the wind off. I'm a big fan of just layering, and I would say the same to everybody. So you don't need big, thick, chunky jumpers, which actually then mean you can't move when you've got your coat on. Just a base layer, a thin fleece, then a nice padded jacket over the top of that. Everything nice and lightweight, and always wear a hat. The gloves that I use are Montaigne Prism gloves. They are the best gloves, and I've gone through a lot of gloves, I kid you not, and they are absolutely amazing because they're super, super lightweight. They're Pertex. They fold up and squish into your fist, and you can operate your camera fine with them, because the minute I take my glove off, I'm then sort of bound pretty useless if my hands go numb.
What about your feet? Do you wear Wellington boots, or do you go for walking boots that are waterproof?
I always wear wellies. I even on the East Coast here, or when the sea's quite flat, I wear wellies. And it's taken me ages to find a really good pair, but I swear by the muck boots, which are the neoprene, and they're fantastic, and I can walk for miles in them. So I feel better in wellies.
Okay, so could I have your second number, please?
I'll go for number 2.
Your photos have a definite style and colour palette, and I always recognise them instantly. Do you ever shoot outside that aesthetic? And do you feel constrained by your reputation for shooting ICM? That's 2 questions combined from Paula and Mariange.
Thank you very much for 2 really great questions there. And thank you. That's a really big compliment. Where I think a lot of photographers would say the same when somebody says, "Oh, I recognised instantly that it was yours." I think with ICM, and I say this to a lot of my clients, in terms of sort of defining your own style as a photographer, it's one of the hardest things to do. With ICM, because it's more about the feeling as opposed to the literal scene in front of you, because generally we're not photographing what it looks like. It's much easier to sort of define your style quite quickly with what you like. In terms of colour palette, yes, I do have a preferred colour palette to work with. I prefer to shoot with the sun setting behind me or rising behind me. I find it offers a much softer light and then gives me those beautiful blues, purples and pinks that you see so much. I love blues in general and greys, all those soft grey winter light that you get in Scotland most of the time. I love to work with. So that was part of the question. What was the other part? Sorry.
Do you ever feel constrained by your reputation for shooting ICM? And do you ever shoot outside of that aesthetic?
I do, yes. I do still take my tripod out every now and then as well. I was actually just having a conversation the other day how I really wanted to start doing some more long exposures and exploring the minimalism that I'm really still enjoying. I love, one of my favourite genres of photography is wildlife photography, and I follow an awful lot of wildlife photographers. My issue with wildlife photography is I have zero patience, which is why I'm an ICM photographer. But it's something I really feel like I would like to do a little bit of and explore a little bit more. So I don't feel constrained. I do seascapes because I said earlier, I just absolutely love and need for my own well-being to be at the beach, to be by the sea. It really is a special place for me, and I will carry on doing that as long as I still enjoy doing that.
Fair enough. And a side question from me is, when you're shooting some ICM photography, do you tend to move your camera in the same directions, or do you move it in different ways depending on what you're photographing?
Yeah, I'd move it in different ways. I don't stick to sort of just left to right, right to left or anything like that. That there are some photos of mine, and you may be able to tell that I barely move the camera at all. Movement that I do is generally very slow and very, very slight, and really quite considered movement. And I'll always compose a scene before I start moving my camera. So I really do think quite conventionally in a way.
Okay. Could I have your third number, please?
I'm going to go number 4.
Number 4. This is an interesting one. How do you make someone who has never done ICM before comfortable enough to give it a go? Are there any exercises that you can ask them to do which go from simple to more complex? That's from Janina.
Great question. Thank you very much. I've got quite a good example, actually. So I had a one-to-one client just a couple of weeks ago, and it was her first time doing ICM. And she wanted to be able to go out a bit more locally to the beaches around where she lives in Scotland. And she was petrified of moving the camera. I guess a lot of people who have been doing landscape photography, having pin-sharp images is ingrained into your being. And moving away and being handheld, if you're a tripod photographer, that also is kind of, a bit alien to some people and a little bit nerve-wracking. And the exercises I did, because this lady just really struggled physically moving the camera. So we tried doing it, away from her body, through the viewfinder, not worrying about even pressing the shutter button. Let's just move with the camera. One of the things I always suggest is the way I do it. I take all my photographs through the viewfinder to have full control over the camera. I'm holding my camera and I'm almost wearing my camera as if it's a pair of VR goggles. So the camera's not moving, my head's moving, and I am one with that camera. And that's a really good exercise to do. And just, if you're not used to handheld as well, if you go out and do 3 hours of ICM, you're going to have achy muscles at the end of that 3 hours. There's no denying that at all.
Yeah. So could I have your fourth number, please?
Number 9.
How much editing do you do? Few people ask that.
All of my shots are single exposure shots. I haven't done much multiple exposure work, as I haven't had a camera until recently that offers me that opportunity. As ICM photographers, we take a lot of photos, probably in the realm of wildlife photographers. So hundreds. I take a lot less than I used to, but it's still a lot, especially if it's waves. Now, I'm a big advocate for getting it right in camera. And the reasons for this is, and I've learned everything the long way and the hard way, but the biggest reasons for this is it's going to be incredibly overwhelming if you get back with 1,000 images that you want to review that actually you can't necessarily see the best results until you start processing them. So I really, really work, especially when I'm out in the field with people, I really, really work on getting those results in camera as best as we can. And I use filters and graduated filters to really, really support that. And then ultimately, the other thing that's very important to me is colour and having consistent colour. But I want to represent the colour that I'm actually witnessing and seeing, and getting the best results in camera is going to really, really help that, because we know, the shifting colour balance can be a bit of a nightmare when it comes to editing in Photoshop and Lightroom. So minimal is what I would say most of the times. But there are times I enjoy editing and I enjoy processing, and there are times I have a bit of a creative moment and I may do a little bit more and push those boundaries. But generally speaking, I use Adobe Camera Raw and I use Photoshop, and it's minor tweaks, a little dodging and burning, and dust spot removal.
Okay, thank you. So could I have your penultimate number then, please?
Number 7.
Number 7. Okay. Well, what are your favourite lenses for seascape ICM? And again, several people asked that question.
That's easy. So thank you for asking. My absolute go-to lens is my 24-70. One bit of advice I would give anybody who is starting out in ICM and seascape ICM is do switch your lenses about, because you will get very different results. But also, when you're shooting ICM with a long lens, you do require less movement because you've got a much narrower angle of view. And that was also a mistake that I made. It feels different, that the bigger the lens. But my 24-70, 80% of my images are using that, and probably more at the 24 to sort of 50 end of that range. I like to be able to convey big, vast seascapes. So that would be why.
Okay. So your final question then, please, the final number.
Number 10.
Where are your favourite UK coastal locations outside of Scotland? And then maybe outside of the UK as well? And again, several people asked that.
Oh, I love that question. Oh, that's a great question to end on. Again, quite easy. So I'm going to start with Northumberland. So I'm very lucky. I'm only an hour away from Northumberland. I can get there very, very easily. I hold workshops in Northumberland, and the beaches are spectacular. One in particular called Gossick Beach, which is literally probably only 10 miles from the Scottish border. Massive, long expanse of sand, big sand dunes. So beautiful. I grew up in the south of England, in Hampshire, and holidayed in Cornwall because my granny and granddad lived in Cornwall. So the beaches in Cornwall are obviously incredibly special. But also I was only a stone's throw from West Wittering Beach. And West Wittering Beach, having just been back there for a series of workshops for the first time in 5 years, I worked out. It was like a nostalgic trip down memory lane. It was absolutely fantastic. But that is an incredible and vast beach at low tide, and so many amazing opportunities for abstract and seascape photography there.
And do you have a favourite outside of the UK, or have you stuck within the UK?
Yeah, one of the places that's on my absolute bucket list to go and shoot ICM is Cape Cod in America. So I visited there in 2015 with just a point and shoot. I wasn't doing ICM at that point, but the beaches of the Cape Cod coastline are absolutely incredible, and it's definitely on my bucket list of where I would like to go and shoot and spend some time alone, immersed in the vast beaches there.
Fabulous. Do you have a date in mind, a year in mind for that?
Yeah. I keep booking too many things and then I have no time for anything else. So that is my problem. So I need to actually start putting myself, my husband, and our holidays as a priority instead of everything else.
So maybe on the 1st of January, like you say, when you're sitting down promising things, maybe you need to sit there with your calendar and highlight a few dates for yourself.
Yes.
Well, Shona, thank you so much for answering all those questions and for joining me today on the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Special thanks to everybody who sent in questions. You'll find links to Shona's website and social media channels in the show notes. I'll be back with another episode soon, so please subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform and tell all your friends and followers about it. You'll also find She Clicks on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube if you search for She Clicks Net. So until next time, enjoy your photography. If you're still listening, post on Facebook that you listen to the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast with Shona Perkins and tag She Clicks Net. The first 3 UK-based people to post will win a prize.
Oh, wow.